All right, New City Catechism question number 9. What does God require in the first, second, and third commandments? So, if you remember last week's video, we tried to memorize all 10 commandments as the answer to that last week's question. Did you do that? I worked on it. I worked on it. But maybe if you did, you remember the first 3 commandments, and I'll paraphrase. You shall have no other gods before me. This is God speaking, obviously. You shall not make or worship idols, and you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. So, what do these 3 commandments mean for us? That's what we're answering today. And the answer is first, that we know and trust God as the one true and living God. Second, that we avoid all idolatry and do not worship God improperly. And third, that we treat God's name with fear and reverence, honoring also his word and works. When Jesus was asked what the most important commandment was, he said there were 2, and we'll talk about the second one in a couple weeks. But the first, he said, was to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. And that really sums up what we find in the first 3 commandments. It's a focus on God and on worshiping him exclusively and worshiping him as he is. So let's break down these 3. The first commandment says, you shall have no other gods before me. And this means no other gods, period. It means God is the one and only. Don't worship any other gods. And we may think we don't struggle with this, but the truth is, it's really easy for us to worship other gods. It turns out, anytime we trust something to provide, trust something or someone to provide something for us that only God can provide and that only God should be trusted to provide, we're turning that thing into a god and we're worshiping it as a god. So you don't have to worship Zeus or Anubis or Vishnu or any of these pagan gods to worship false gods. You could worship money. You could worship sex. You could worship people's opinion of you. You could worship your career or your family or your kids. And ultimately, any of these things, if you look to these things and say, that thing is going to make me happy, that thing is what I need to be safe or to be secure or to have purpose or significance, that thing is why I matter or why I'm here, ultimately, you're worshiping that thing as a god. And the first commandment says, don't do that. Only one true and living God. The second commandment says, don't worship idols. And we might sometimes think that's the same as the first one, but actually what this one is saying is not only should we not worship other gods, but we also shouldn't worship a false picture of God. We shouldn't worship God according to our idea of who he is or what he's like. We should worship him as he truly is, as he's revealed in Scripture. So if you call yourself a Christian, but you worship a God who is all just love and compassion and friendliness and good warm feelings, and he never tells you you're wrong, and he's never angry at anyone, and he doesn't have a problem with anybody's sin, that's an idol. On the flip side, if you worship a God who's all wrath and anger and justice, but there's no mercy, there's no compassion, there's no grace, that's an idol too. So we need to worship God as he truly is, as he's revealed himself in Scripture. That's how we avoid worshiping idols. And then really all of this kind of gets summed up in commandment number 3. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Or some older translations say, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And today we've kind of watered this down to just mean there are certain things we shouldn't say, and don't even type the letters OMG. And that's important. It is, because the words we use and how we use them usually are a sign of what's going on in our hearts. But this commandment is really about so much more than just not saying certain words. It's about God's name in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, refers not just to like a word, but it represents his character. It represents who he is. It represents his works, his deeds, all that he's done, all that he is. And so when we misrepresent God, we're actually taking his name in vain. If we are talking about God and we talk about him wrong, we're misusing his name. And if our lives talk about him wrong, if we call ourselves Christians, we are literally bearing the name of God. Well, if our lives speak falsely about who he is, if we're living in disobedience to him, if we aren't honoring him and worshiping him alone and worshiping him as he is revealed, as he is himself, then we're misusing the name of God. Why is all this important? It really connects with some of the things we've already looked at in earlier videos. The fact that we were made to worship and glorify God. It's why we exist. And so if we don't get these first three commandments right, nothing else is ever going to satisfy us. Nothing else is ever going to bring us peace or significance or comfort or real joy, lasting joy, any of these things, right? Because we're designed to worship God. We're designed to glorify him, and that means worshiping him as he is, as he's revealed himself to us, and it means honoring his name in our words, in our lives, in who we are and how we represent him, so that he and he alone is the only God we strive to worship. That's pretty much what we find in the first three commandments. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you've got more insights or questions, I'd love to hear them, and I'll see you next week. Bye.